The agenda for today would be something like this. We'll just go over some basics of what Agile is, and then we'll just see if we can have the challenges listed, what we face as challenges in as writers in our day-to-day work environment, and then see how we can walk hand in hand with Agile to beat these challenges, and see if we can list down some benefits. And at the last, I may have some recommendations to step up and work beyond a writer's role. Of course, to make a session a bit interactive, while we progress through the discussion, we will have some small polls on and off, and I would request you to drop a +1 or a -1 in the chat, and then maybe Vendula can just let me know how many +1s and how many -1s we have, because I am not able to see the chat.
Okay, will do, ma'am.
Does this sound good for everyone? Yeah, so we start with the poll again. How many of us are experienced with Agile methodologies? People might have worked in their past roles, or maybe they are working in the current organization, or maybe you just know what Agile is in theory, or you know very little about Agile. +1s if you have experience or are working, and -1s if you just know it in theory or know very little about it.
Seven, 8, 9. 1 minus, but vast majority of people plus. Okay, 2, 3. 8 or 10 people have some experience, and 3 people didn't have the opportunity to work Agile.
Oh, well, so most of us are already experienced, or at least know what Agile is. So for the ones who do not know, we're just going to kind of brush up here. So Agile it was formed as an alliance in 2001 when some of the software engineers and some experts came together, and they were trying to see what's going wrong in the project they were working on, why are the projects delayed, what challenges they're facing, and things like that. And after they had a review and the retrospective of what they were going through, they came up with this manifesto and had these principles laid down, wherein they said that for a project, individuals and interactions are over the processes and tools that they're following. They also had working software is over comprehensive documentation, collaboration is over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. But the second bullet that is here, which is working software over comprehensive documentation, is kind of a wrong notion that they got into, because a software cannot be complete without documentation. And that's where they started getting into the discussion again of how to get with the working software with the piece of documentation along with the software. They also had some Agile principles and processes and methodologies that they put forward in place, and they decided that possibly the incremental development in which the software is developed, where they develop, test, review, and document, is a better way of approaching towards developing a software, because that kind of gives you a chance to go over the requirements, test them, review them, and document them in smaller chunks, which are called as sprints. In contrast to having the requirements reviewed at the beginning of the project, and then getting the project developed, then tested, and then documented. So by the time your project or your product is out in the market, your requirements might have changed, or it's too late for the documentation cycle to start, because by then the resources within the team have moved to different projects and the talent is lost. So in considering all these points, they decided that incremental development is something that might add to the project life cycle. And again, the team is the core. Cooperation and communication and self-organization and ownership is something that they found to be the core of any project or any software development. Because no matter how many tools, how different specialized tools are you working on, but the team finally needs to be working in tandem with each other, and there needs to be responsibilities and ownership that the team shows. Now, coming to the methodologies and processes, they decided that let's review the requirements and then break them down into something called as epics. We might also call them as features, and then drill them down to user stories. These user stories, they pick them in something called as smaller chunks, that is sprints, and each sprint has a planning phase where the scrum teams meet, and then they ensure that all the tasks for that particular user story is done. In that sense, the development, the testing, and the documentation is done, and the retrospective meeting is also held. So this is how Agile looks like in a nutshell. But of course, this is all theoretical, and we know everything looks great in theory. How does it look in practical? How many of us are ready to agree that Agile helps? And how many of us say that no, Agile does not really help and we have too many challenges there? +1 again for people who prefer Agile, and -1 again for people who say that no, Agile adds to the complications and challenges. Do we have a count, Vendula?
Yes, again, 3, 5, 6 people plus. No one total minus, but there are 2 zeros and 1 plus 1 minus 1. It depends. So it's not negative, but there are some concerns, definitely.
Yes, and there will be, because it's a new trend that is coming up in the software industry, and every change brings its own challenges. So I'm sure, but most of us, as we see the count, are agreeing that Agile definitely helps. And I'm sure the challenges here on the sounding board are something that we go through day in, day out while we are working with the teams. And most of this kind of echoes our feelings. So now how do we go ahead? Oh, now are there anything more to this list? We definitely have, and here are the ones. We don't know when to start. Should we start in the same sprint? Should we start one sprint later? Should we start few sprints later? Because while we are working in the sprint, the development team is busy coding. This testing team is busy testing. So who gives us the inputs? So is it a good idea to start one sprint later? Now, how do we write a user story?
Can I add something to the first point, Shweta? I think we should start before the first sprint. Actually, we should start to communicate with the product manager before it goes to the development. But yeah, that's my.
Yeah, thanks, Vendula. That's a great input, really. I'm coming to that in how to beat the challenges. So here are some more additional challenges that we would really like to list, and we definitely must be facing this on our daily basis. And that gives us a big question that how do we really beat these challenges? But there's definitely a food for thought that midst of all chaos, there definitely is an opportunity. Now, how do we find that opportunity? To find that opportunity, it would be a good idea to see if we can align our content development life cycle with the project life cycle. Typically, we have seen a project life cycle has phases like planning, execution, monitor and control, close, and then the next phase starts with initiation again. On the same lines, a content development lifecycle also has a few phases wherein we research on the requirements that the project has or the release has. Then we plan, we estimate, we write, we review, and we publish. So is there a method where we can see if we can fit in the content development phases with the project life cycle phases? Maybe that helps us to come to a conclusion whether or maybe identify the methods how we can beat these challenges. So this is a rough example of how we can walk hand in hand with the agile teams. While the development team is still planning, we also can plan at our side. And how we can do that, we will see in a minute on the next slide probably. So basically, this is how we can map a content development life cycle with the project development life cycle. Now, coming to how to beat these challenges, as I mentioned, we saw different phases, and let's see if we can identify what tasks we can complete in these phases to walk hand in hand with the development and the testing teams. Now, the first phase that we saw was the initiation phase, wherein we can start participating in the planning meetings to know the requirements, the functionalities, and the tasks involved. What does this help us to do is it helps us to research the requirements. It helps us to identify what impact it might be for us as writers. And then we can start actually drafting the user stories while the team is planning on how to implement the functionality. Identify the doc impact, and then probably even draft a TOC. So when we are drafting a TOC and we are getting a feedback on the TOC, we have a skeleton ready for our doc. And then it gets easy for us to start drafting the content for the sections that we have identified. Now, when it's the execution phase, the Scrum meetings typically meet every day, and we have something called as stand-up meetings, which everybody of us must be knowing because almost all of us are working in Agile. So I would say it's a very good idea to go participate in those stand-up meetings, wherein we are able to share where we are. We also get to hear where the other teams are, and the discussions that happen gives us a set of inputs that we are actually looking forward for. We also get to know if we have missed out on some points, so that helps us to fill the gaps if we have left any. In addition, we also get to build a rapport. We also get to know the team members. So just in case if we feel that we need to talk or schedule a meeting one-on-one with the team members, that helps us to do that. So execution phase is somewhere we actually start getting into action and start getting to work with the team. We also saw some of the challenges which were mostly concerned with the time, because we have to work with more than one Scrum. And how do we do that? We have to start working in parallel. At the same time, limit the number of Scrums that you can work with. But if that's not really possible, you prioritize your Scrum meetings and you skip some Scrum meetings. If there are some additional team members who are working with you in the Scrums, you can probably ask them to attend the Scrum meeting on your behalf and then maybe sync up later. Or you could just add your reviewed drafts content in the content management system and request the team to provide you a feedback. So these are some of the ways to beat these challenges. And the most of all is get involved, build a rapport, and be a team member. That really helps to get ahead where you really want to go and meet the team goal of completing that functionality in that particular sprint. Now, coming to some of the benefits. First and foremost benefit is you start feeling that you're involved with the team. You start feeling responsible for the tasks you are performing. you start understanding the requirements, and that's where you start talking in the language that these technical guys are talking. You don't feel missed out or left out. You start to learn. You start to basically build skills and add values to your own skills. And you start then improving the content authoring techniques, the processes and tools. So it's a win-win situation where you start building your own skills. Now we saw some of the challenges, we saw some of the benefits. I do have a few recommendations and ideas where you can actually step up from being a technical writer and get involved a bit more with the team. And these are some suggestions that I could make. Writers being the communication experts, you can actually step up to be a Scrum Master. Scrum Masters definitely do not need to be technical experts where you know everything about the product that is being developed. All you need a better coordination with the team and a better way of organizing the Scrum tasks. So this is one of the roles that you could pick up. We have Agile trainings wherein you could take up this training and pick up the role of a Scrum Master. As early users, writers are actually working with the product while you actually document them. So you are a usability tester for the product being developed. You can start filing bugs, at least the cosmetic bugs that you see. So you're helping the testers or the QE team here being the usability tester. Now, as text experts, you can start providing UI reviews and the UI text. Now, what is UI reviews and UI text is a complete different discussion, and we can see more in the workshop that Vendula is going to hold at the end of this session. But wherever there's the UI development happening, we do see some helper text and the labels on the screen. Not all helper text and the UI labels are really intuitive that help the user who's working with the web page. In these areas, you can step up and provide your reviews. You can provide your suggestions that the functionality on this page is so and so, and the text here can be modified to this so that it helps the user to get the piece of information that is required, and he does not have to navigate from the web page to some documentation, refer to what it needs, and then come back to the web page and provide the inputs. So you're kind of helping the user there. As an earlier user, you can also start helping probably the content strategists in your team or the managers in the team by writing the user stories and developing the content strategy. So these are some of the recommendations that I have to work in the Agile environment and step up even beyond your technical writer's role. And that's more or less what I had about what Agile is and how we can go about documenting in Agile, what challenges we have, and how we can beat these challenges. Of course, this is a small experience that I had over the years that I have worked in Agile. I definitely am learning more. So just in case if you all have any questions and I can answer them, I'll be more than happy. Thank you. Are there any questions that we have, Vendula?
There are no. Lena was asking how much of a technical writer FTE. What is FTE, Lena? Do you need in one Scrum team?
What is FTE?
Yeah, sorry, my mic was muted. FTE is full-time equivalent.
Uh-huh.
Lena, it really depends on the resources that a technical writing team would be having. So not every time a single writer is assigned to a single Scrum. So if we see the ratio of the number of developers versus number of writers, the writers definitely are assigned to more than one Scrum team. So in that case, a full-time writer, I'm not sure if a full-time writer is assigned to a single team anytime.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Two more questions. The first one is there a restriction in Scrum on the size of a cross-functional team?
I don't think so. We have the number of developers, typically 3 to 4. QEs maybe 1 or 2. Writers I've not seen beyond 1. And of course, we have a project manager and a PO and a Scrum Master there. But as far as my experience goes, we were on an average 7 to 8 of us in one Scrum.
Yeah, I think officially they say it should be 7 plus minus 2.
Mm.
I think every company implements their own version of Agile or Scrum as well. I've been on teams that were 18 and more.
Yeah, I was just curious about that because I'm aware of TECOM's recommendation where there should be one full-time tech writer per 30 plus minus software engineers, which means developers, architects, testers, and so on. So it's pretty clear to me that one tech writer is assigned to several Scrum teams. My guess would be 3 or 4.
Yes.
That is my experience too. I always worked for 2 or 3 projects at the same time.
Yeah, and I work for one corporate client who currently is introducing Agile methodology into their software development. And I helped them to write a handbook for DevOps. And we've run into problems that they didn't have definitions of done. And it's a really serious trouble because nobody knows when a chapter of that handbook is finished. And I was wondering why that happens. And I think the problem started when we began architecting the structure of the handbook, and we didn't update the tasks with user stories when we were designing the lower level, the detailed structure of the handbook. So perhaps the question is, how do you define user stories when you are architecting a bigger topic or a bigger scope? I mean, when you're architecting a bigger set of docs and you need to work out the structure first, how do you write a user story for, are those user stories for the task too? And if not, how do you work with definitions of done?
So here I'll take an example and then work with it. Like for example, I want to install a product XYZ. Now that becomes my epic. Now as part of this epic, what all do I need to know when I need to install this product? I need to know on what architecture this is supported. So my user story could be, as a dash user, I need to know the supported architectures. I need to know, the second user story could be, as a dash user, I need to know the prerequisites for this, for installing this product. That is my next user story. The third could be, I need to know the workflow for this, for installing this software, so that I can be prepared that, okay, these are the steps that I need to perform. And then the fourth could be actual installation steps. So a broader epic, you need to break it down into what tasks would you be really interested in, or what tasks are you really going to perform to install that particular software. And those small tasks are your user stories. Now, when I say I would like to know the prerequisites, now as part of the prerequisites, I still need to drill down in terms of what is the memory that is required, what is the hardware that is required, what are the networking details that I need. Is there anything security wise that I need? Are there any firewall settings that I need to do? So all these things are further drilling down into the details of a user story. So this is how you go about building those user stories. Is this anywhere helping you answer the question that you had?
Not really. I'm talking a little bit different scope. I'm talking a greater scope. I'm talking about designing a structure on a greater scale before I get to these details, if you catch my drift.
So in that case too, now the way I go about it is I first try and understand what the requirement is overall. What are we trying to even achieve as part of this particular project? And then as a user, do I need to know anything conceptually initially? Yes. So what is this product going to be used for? How can that be deployed? So this becomes my conceptual information. And then further down, how am I going to deploy this? Are there any prerequisites that I need to satisfy? Are there any pre-installation tasks I need to perform? So all these questions that I'm having are going to be an individual user story for me.
Yeah, I get it, but that's still not what I need to. So I'm sorry.
Lena, I might have a point. Actually, that's agile. That you don't know and you start with something small and start to build. That's the problem. That's the difference between waterfall and agile. We don't need to know the overall perspective on scoping. We just start something and in weeks evaluate. Therefore, we would just start with the first installation user story and then continue. But we don't need these high-level architectural stuff because the structure of documentation is perfectly flat, and you just need to specify user stories at the ground level. Therefore, I like Agile. That I don't need this. What do you think?
So you're telling me that you are designing something without knowing the bigger picture?
Lena, Vendula, first thanks for adding there. Lena, here it's not designing without knowing anything. It's designing with the bare minimum information that we have in hand right now, and
right.
this might change as we go ahead and actually start working with it. So with the bare minimum information that I had, I kind of created a doc skeleton. And while I actually started working on a particular user story, I figured out that, oh, this needs to be still broken down, or maybe this is really not even required in the doc. So as Agile is, it will keep constantly changing. But at least when we get started with a particular piece of doc, we at least know what do we want to hit here. It's not a complete blank slate that we completely don't know anything.
Okay, I have one more question. When you draft some structure, how do you define when it's done with the information you have currently available?
Okay, so when I draft a skeleton, I am actually doing it in reference to the requirements that I have discussed with the project management team, or probably have some functional design doc to refer to. So I ensure that the pieces that I have referred to are covered in the doc skeleton that I have come up with. I send it out for review, and the PM or the development team are the experts to let me know if my understanding is correct, or if my understanding is missing something, or if there's something that I've totally understood incorrectly and I've drafted it there in this doc skeleton. So they would be the people who would let me know what needs to be changed here. And even then, when I actually start working with it, there might be some changes that come in that, oh, this is what I had thought, but it's not this way. So let's change it this to a little bit of this extent. But again, that helps me there because I was prepared that this is something that I would need to work on, rather than being completely blank and going to the developer and saying that, hey, okay, I'm standing here and I'm going to help you documenting this piece of software. Now let me know what needs to be documented. So rather than going with this approach, I'm actually working with them.
Yeah, perfect. Now we got to the roots. So back to well-defined requirements. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
And Levi also added something. Levi, can you elaborate your knowledge?
Yeah, sure. I was essentially saying that you might want to start by defining what is the bare minimum information that your user needs to perform a particular task. And from there, after reading the bare minimum, you can start thinking about adding some more details. So you're essentially not building from the top down, but from the bottom up.
Yes, Levi, I agree with it. Thank you so much for adding that.